Today, I am talking to Mallory Bauer with Berlin Patton Eberling Law Firm. Mallory, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us on today's video.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. As Lisa said, my name is Mallory Bauer. I'm with Berlin Patton Eberling. I'm a Sarasota native, so I was born here. So I've seen all of the wonderful changes that we've had.
Wonderful. So let's get right into it because everyone asks me, how much does it actually cost to close on a loan? And I know that's kind of a loaded question because are you paying cash? Are you financing? There's just so many different things that go into closing costs. But in Florida, I tell people, generally you have to budget 3% of your purchase price. However, I'd like your input on that and tell me what you see, because Mallory does all of our closings. And so she's the one that looks at all the numbers to make sure they're correct.
Yes. So I think your estimate that you say 3% is a fantastic start. That's typically what I see. That's more with finance transactions. With cash, usually about 1.5% is what I say. There's drastic differences in closing costs with cash transactions and finance. On a cash transaction, really the only fees, if the buyer is picking and paying in our market, are the title search, the lien search, the owner's policy, and then recording fees for a deed. So there are very, very minimal costs for paying cash.
Okay, so let's talk about those because those are standard fees that everyone, whether it's cash or financed, have to pay. And what are those? Tell a little bit about what each one is, especially owner's policy. Some people are like, what does that even mean?
Yeah. So no matter what, whoever is picking and paying in the contract. So in our market, Sarasota Manatee, typically the buyer is picking and paying. And so what that entails is having those fees that I just said, that no matter what cash or finance transaction, there will be a title search. So with our firm, it's usually between $60 and $75, so pretty minimal fee. What that is doing is running a search through the chain of title and the public records to ensure there's no liens on the property, no defects, no encumbrances, all of that. It really gives us a clear picture of title. So anybody is going to do that. A lien search, on the other hand, that's usually between $90 and $125. So again, pretty minimal cost. That is going through if there's any utilities that are unpaid, special assessments, taxes, open or expired permits. That's what that is doing. And then the biggest cost is the owner's title insurance policy. So that is based off of the purchase price. So if you have a lower purchase price, your owner's policy is going to be lower. If you have a higher purchase price, your owner's policy is going to be higher. That is just based off of Florida Title Insurance Calculator. Some states have a way that they can negotiate their rates. Florida does not have that. We're a promulgated state, so we plug in the number and the policy amount pops out to us.
And it's mandatory, correct?
So in the state of Florida, it is not statutorily mandatory. There are some states where it's a statute, you cannot close without it. Florida is not one of those states. However, there's hardly anybody that closes without them. I know some people on the East Coast, Miami area, have done that. But in our market, Sarasota Manatee, Hillsborough, Pinellas, no law firm and really even a title company is going to close without it because it's a massive, massive risk. Florida is the number one state for title claims, probably because so many people pass here. And we give a discount as well.
And you said pick and pay. So if the seller wants to pick the closing or the title or who provides title, do they then cover that cost?
Correct. So if the seller is picking and paying, the seller would be paying for the title search, the lien search, the owner's policy, and the closing fee. So if you have a cash buyer and the seller is picking and paying, the only fees they're really going to be charged is the $18.50 to record the deed. There's obviously tax prorations as well. So depending on what time of the year we're at, the buyer could be crediting the seller or vice versa. But if a seller is picking and paying on a buyer cash contract, probably less than $1,000 for closing costs.
Well, that's great. So is there a good time of the month or preferred time of the month to close?
Yes, so that's a wonderful question. So if you are paying with a finance, if you're doing finance, you always have 2 months before your mortgage is due. So I personally closed on a house on August 3rd, I didn't have to pay my mortgage until October 1st. If I would have closed on August 31st, I still would have had to pay on October. So that, if for finance buyers, I say that. In regards to best times to close, for some reason, all properties seem to get very close to end of month or a Friday. I always advise, if you can, maybe do mid-month or the very beginning of the month on a Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. Your client is going to get extra special attention because they have no competition on a busy day, or, we might have 5 or 6 closings as opposed to a Tuesday, Wednesday, or Thursday mid-month.
I am a huge fan of telling my clients, let's close like the 21st of the month,
Yeah.
or and again, in the middle of the week. I do not like Friday closings. I don't like Monday closings.
Yeah.
There's just so many details that go in at the last minute. So I agree with you on that.
Yeah.
Okay. So when somebody is getting ready to close, I know this comes up quite a bit. How do they transfer the funds to you?
Great question. So actually, we had a statutory update in our contract last, or I guess, wow, it's almost been a year now, last November, where they really defined what the word collected means. So now in the contract, what collected means is we have to, as closing agents, be in receipt of those funds. So it wiped out us ever being really able to collect checks at closing, because we have to have them deposited in our account. We use a software system where everything is two-factor authentication secure. So we send our wire instructions to our clients via that software system. They have to get a text message from their phone to get them. And then we are usually providing them to the client at the beginning for their deposit, and then a couple days before closing so they can have the same wire instructions, go to their bank. If you're able to, just some banks take 15 minutes, some takes 4 hours. And we don't want to be down to the wire on closing day waiting for funds. It could trigger some sort of default provision, and we never want to do that. So
yeah, wiring is, I always tell my clients, I leave it to the professionals because I want to make sure those funds arrive on time and where they're supposed to be.
yes.
So we hear a lot about Florida tax stamps and when buying and selling. Do you want to dive into that just a little bit so that that term isn't foreign to everyone?
Yes, absolutely. So in Florida, we don't have income state tax. The way that the state of Florida makes money off of real estate transaction is documentary stamp taxes. So the way that our contracts are written down here is the seller always pays for the documentary stamp taxes on the deed. That is typically a higher number than the documentary stamp taxes on the mortgage. And the way that is calculated is the deed is 70 cents for every $100, and the mortgage is every $100, it's 35 cents. So it's cut in half. But the seller always pays for the doc stamps on the deed. Buyer always pays for the doc stamps on the mortgage. Everything is negotiable. So while the contract states seller pays for it, I have seen some instances where buyer will pay for the doc stamps in the additional terms or something like that. But all it is a method for Florida to recoup some of the funds for all of the people doing business down here. Since they're recorded and executed documents, the taxes are actually on that document in and of themselves.
What is the advantage of actually picking and paying? Because I personally think there are some advantages, but
there are big advantages. And I actually have a little chart I've made. I'll email to you, and you can give that to your clients as well. But there's benefits on both sides. So no matter what, if you're on the buyer or the seller side, if you're picking and paying, you're getting that attorney representation and you're controlling the transaction. So I can see it on the buyer side where you're buying your maybe first investment property or your first home. You want to have attorney representation and have that guidance of making sure everything is clean and clear. You're getting clean title. If there are any defects, we can remedy them and not have to outhouse or outsource to another company. But then on the seller side, if you have a estate or a probate, or you have a little tricky of a situation, you might want to pick and pay because you're going to have that representation and you're not going to have to get an attorney anyways if the buyer is picking it. If you have a survey defect, you might want to be picking and paying as a seller so that we're not outright disclosing it to the buyer. Because while we are title agents, and I am a title agent, I'm an attorney first. So I'm always representing the buyer or seller, whoever is my client. and I'm putting forth their best interests. So there's pluses and minuses on both. Obviously, if you're paying for the representation and you're picking and paying, your fees are a little bit higher. But I've seen contracts too where it might be a seller pick and pay, and we have the buyer pay for the doc stamps on the deed. So they kind of balance each other out. But yes, I'll make a note and I'll send you that chart and you can send it to your clients when they ask.
That'd be great. I am a fan of the pick and pay for and I know it's an added fee I get, but I like having my clients be the one to choose. I love knowing they have a representation. Mallory, thank you so much for joining us today. I'd love to let everyone know how they can reach you if they have questions about closings, title, legal questions. What's the best way to reach you?
So you can always email me or phone is probably the best way. My email is mbauer, like my last name, Bauer, at Berlin, like the city in Germany, Patten, PATTEN.com. And then my phone number is 941-954-9991. I'm always happy to answer any questions that you might have if you're pre-signing an offer and just a little nervous, or if you just have general questions about anything.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you so much. I really appreciate all your help
You're
all
welcome.
the time.
Have a good day.
You too.